We were talking about Jeremiah, so this is the remnants, right? We talked about like 90% going and just a remnant would be left, so this is the remnants. So thank you for staying strong and being in the remnants. Thank you for being over 16 years old.
Yes.
Appreciate it. So we are concluding our series today on the church letters in Revelation, which maybe this has gotten a little bit of a doldrum maybe because it feels like the same thing week after week. But I guarantee you that today is not going to be the same thing. So this is the climax. There's kind of been a build-up week after week. It's been a very slow build-up, but this last church, there was some stuff going on there. Some big stuff, and some stuff that I really feel like we can relate to big time in 21st century America. So this city is called Laodicea. Try saying that 10 times fast. If you'd like, you can come up and say on the microphone, it would be really entertaining. Anyway, it's called Laodicea, and so this was still in Western Asia Minor. The city today is, I'm going to butcher this, Eskişehir, Turkey. Yeah. And so this was actually at the crossroads of a few different trade routes. So it wasn't actually in a very prime location. Cities back in those days would be usually either really near water or on top of a mountain. Like there would be a geographic reason for the city. This one wasn't because of a specific geographic region. It was because it was like a midpoint in several different trade routes. So in and of itself, it wasn't a prime location, but it became a prime location because it was about a day's journey from so many other important cities, and it became an important city in and of itself because of that. A lot of people who moved there were relatively wealthy. It was an economic hub of its day. I feel like I just lost my voice. What's up?
You want a bottle of water?
That'd be great. Thank you. And so the city was actually found one other place in the Bible. We can go back to Colossians, the last chapter, as Paul closes that book. He said, after this letter has been read to you, see that it is also read in the church of the Laodiceans, that you in turn read the letter from Laodicea. Thank you so much. So that would have been a letter that was written by the Apostle Paul, probably about 20 to 30 years earlier. And that's not one that we still have today. We do have the letter that he wrote to the city of Colossae, which would be only about 11 miles away. It's about 11 miles south of Laodicea, so very, very close. For us, 11 miles is nothing, right? Like Valmy is like 15 miles and it feels like it's right there. This is only 11 miles. Remember? Yeah, but remember also they didn't have cars, so that would be close to a day's journey. Typically, it'd be about 10 miles a day, something like that. If you're walking multiple days. If you're taking your family.
Oh,
Yeah.
3 is the days.
Mm-mm. So yeah, it would be about 6 to 10 miles a day would be the average. So it was about a day's journey from Colossae. It was also about a day's journey from Hierapolis. It was about 19 miles, so a day to 2 days journey from there. So those were two very important, very influential cities in the Roman Empire. And so it was kind of the midway point between those two cities. And so also as a reminder here that these were all letters. These were letters written from, in the case of Colossians, it was the Apostle Paul. And the letter would be sent from one church to another church. The church, each city had its own church. They would only have one church. We're a city, we're not even a city, we're a town. We have like 9 churches. But back then there was only one church in a city and they would commune together. And so this was written by Paul to give to the people of Colossae, and then he was reminding them to go ahead and pass it on to the next town. And so these letters that were written from apostles, they would often go from town to town to town. They'd be read one weekend here, and then a messenger would take it to the next town and it'd be read the next weekend there. That's how most of our New Testament was circulated. We only have a few of those letters left. For whatever reason, God preserved the letter to the Colossians, and the letter to the Laodiceans has been lost to history. Why did God do that? I don't know, but that's what God decided to do. And so the letters in Revelation were a bit more specific. They were written directly to a church, 7 churches, where they passed around. I don't know, because they are so specific and written not only in general into that city, but very specifically into how that city worked and the just the general feel of each city. I don't know if they would have been passed around as much, but it was very common for a letter to get passed from one church to the next to the next. In fact, back then, they would have somebody who would speak kind of like I do, but they'd also have somebody who is simply called a reader, who would literally stand and read letters at the assemblies as well. That was a position in the early church. So this would be a really common thing for a church to receive a letter from somebody of prominence. In this case, it would be John. So there were significant ties between Colossae, Laodicea, Hierapolis, but even because they're so close. But even with that, Laodicea was a city that was able to stand on its own 2 feet. It was very proud of that. It had a lot of its own businesses. It became a key hub for science and literature in and of itself. Like I said, geographically and topographically, I guess, it wasn't as prime of a location, but because people chose to move there, people of wealth chose to move there, it became a bustling city. So this was the final church Jesus addressed, and last week we talked about Philadelphia, and it was a very positive letter. It said the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl. It did not say the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl. But it was a very positive letter. It was Jesus was commending the church for fighting the good fight, for staying true through all the persecution. This letter to the Laodiceans was the exact opposite of that. It was very, very harsh. You're going to see why in just a second. So to the angel of the church in Laodicea, write, these are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. So just a reminder what this is. So John, the apostle, the disciple who's with Jesus, right? He is on the prison island of Patmos. He's been exiled there for a year to a year and a half. And Jesus shows up in a vision. And he tells him these letters. He dictates them word for word, and John writes them down. And then when John is unexiled, what's the word for that? Like, you get brought back to. Nobody else knows the word either. That's cool. What? Reinstated. That works. So when John goes back to the mainland, he takes these letters with him and he passes them out. So he lives in Ephesus, which is where the first letter went, and so he would have sent messengers from there to each of these other cities. None were super far away. So getting back to what did Jesus have to say to Laodicea? There's one more historical thing, and it's going to be actually really important. So because of where Laodicea was, they weren't exactly on a hill, they weren't in this fortified place, and they didn't have, they had a lot of resources, but there's one resource that they didn't have that was relatively important. They didn't have water. I think, first century, they didn't have quite the piping system that we have here. Water's important, and that was one thing that they were dependent on other cities for. So they were really close to Colossae, about 11 miles, and there were cold springs in Colossae. They were about 19 miles from Hierapolis. There were hot springs in Hierapolis. And so they were able to make a system of aqueducts that would bring that water in. The only issue was that due to the distance and due to the high mineral deposits of the rocks, by the time the water got to them, whether it was the hot water from Hierapolis, the cold water from Colossae, by the time it got to Laodicea, it was very lukewarm. It was no longer hot because it had been exposed. It was no longer cold because it had been exposed. It was lukewarm. And it had a lot of mineral deposits in it too. You can think super, super cold water, super, super hot water running along rocks. It picks up a lot of stuff. And so the water did not taste good at all. And it wasn't super useful anymore either. And so this water issue is tied directly into Jesus' message. Starting at verse 15. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. That doesn't sound real good. Right? It makes me think of like a spit take in like a comedy, right? Like when somebody's like, drinking their soda, coffee, whatever, and they hear something that's crazy and they just like turn around and spit. That's exactly what this like paints a picture. Like, that would not be good to be spit out of Jesus' mouth like that. That's horrible. Yeah, but like hot water could be really useful, right? We use hot water for a lot of things. What are some good uses for hot water? Washing clothes, showering, making coffee. Right? There's a lot of good uses for hot water. How about cold water? Is there good uses for cold water? Drinking, hydration. Cleaning, there's some things you can't clean in hot water, right? You have to clean cold water. So both of those are very useful, but lukewarm water is a lot less useful, especially if it's filled with mineral deposits. Because at that point, it's not even good for cleaning. Have you ever grabbed your water, think it was like super cold, you open it up and take a drink and it's lukewarm? It doesn't taste real good anymore. Have you ever got your coffee and you're gonna take a sip and you realize it's cold. It's actually cold as room temperature, but it's cold compared to what you want it to be. I've definitely had that, taking a sip and it's oh, it's gross. It's not what I was expecting, it's not what I wanted. This lukewarm thing, it's not a good thing. Because hot water is useful, cold water is useful. Lukewarm, mineral deposit water, not so useful. So if lukewarm water isn't useful, what about lukewarm faith? Is lukewarm faith useful? What does lukewarm faith even look like? If we think of the hot or the cold spring, we think of water that's either super hot because it's geothermal. We think of water that's super cold because it's super fresh. And we get that from snow melt. The water is usually pure because it's coming from a source as well. As it flows down the aqueduct, the temperature becomes more like the outside temperature, right? The temperature tries to become homogeneous. Everything goes back to that one temperature. So if it's super hot, it's going to cool down. If it's super cold, it's going to heat up because of the atmosphere around it. So the temperature that it was acquiesces to the atmospheric temperature as it continues to move. So when our faith is hot or cold, we're different. We look different. Cold water is refreshing. Hot water is useful. Lukewarm water, less so. So if your faith is nice and ice and cold, it can be refreshing to God. And your faith is nice and hot, it can be useful to God. But if your faith is just like the rest of the world, it's not going to be useful for anything. If we're hot or cold, we look different than the world because we aren't doing the things of the world. We aren't thinking the way the world thinks. But as we remain in the world, it tries to pull us back into its climate. Right? We climatize to the world around us. We become more and more like the world and less hot or cold. Just like the water assimilating into the atmosphere of the aqueducts as it ran, our lives assimilate into the culture around us. And if that culture is bad, if that culture is anti-God, if that culture is very worldly, we become more and more worldly. As we become more worldly, we become less pleasing to God and less useful for his kingdom. Right? Like if you drink that water that's not cold anymore, if you drink that coffee that's not hot anymore, you might want to spit it out. Like, I don't blame God for spitting out something that's very lukewarm, something that tastes like rocks. It's like Arrowhead. Like why is Arrowhead like the worst tasting water ever? It's nasty. You an Arrowhead fan? Okay. If you guys are gonna make fun of me for liking pickles, you get to make fun of her for liking Arrowhead. Just saying. Jesus also used another earmark of the city as an example. In verse 17, you say I am rich, I have acquired wealth, and do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Ouch. So the people of Laodicea were very proud of their self-reliance. They established a city out of essentially nothing. It was along a trade route, so it was a decent position, but it wasn't a great place. It wasn't an established place. But out of their own wealth, out of their own ingenuity, it became an economic center. They did it all themselves, and they were very proud of that. That pride seeped into the church. Right? There's a lot of other important cities near them, but they didn't rely on those other cities. They relied on themselves, except for water. Yeah. See, pride is not a godly attribute. When we think of pride now, a lot of times we think of worldly things. We think of like the LGBTQ, IA plus. You know, we think of that because like, that's pride. But like, this wasn't written to the LGBTQIA plus community here. This wasn't written to the ghetto streets of Laodicea. This was all written to the church of Laodicea. The church was the one struggling with pride. They saw themselves as self-reliant. They saw themselves as good. But really, that's not how God saw them. Right? The Bible is very clear on what happens to the prideful. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride comes before being destroyed. A proud spirit comes before a fall. Yet, that often seems to be something we struggle with today. And as Americans, we're also very self-reliant. We take a lot of pride in the things that we do. We take a lot of pride in the things that we've accomplished. We're a very individualistic people group. If we don't need help, we don't want help. But also sometimes when we look in the mirror, it's very distorted. A lot of times we don't see the wrong things we do. A lot of times we don't see the wrong attitudes that we carry. We don't even see the way that we put our own feelings over the way others feel. See, when the church of Laodicea looked at themselves, they saw that they were good. But when God looked at them, he saw that they were wretched. He saw that they were pitiful. He saw that they were poor, blind, naked. What is this? It's so different. Where does this contrast come from? So in their pride, they become blinded to reality. And maybe we do too. Maybe we look at ourselves and go, man, I got this. I got this made. I am pretty good after all. I can handle this. Maybe we see ourselves as sufficient, and we don't see the flaws people around us see. But even though you don't see it, I guarantee your spouse does. Maybe you don't see it, but your kids do. Maybe you don't see it, but your friends do. Are we comparing ourselves with who we were yesterday? Because yeah, there should be some growth from day to day. But man, that bar is low. We're comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday, or are we comparing ourselves to Jesus? Because those are two very different bars. There's a bar that's almost impossible not to clear if we have any effort at all. I mean, it'd be like me trying to clear this cord. Yeah, that was easy. Better than I was yesterday. I tried. I'm better. But we should be comparing ourselves to Jesus. Are we ever going to reach that? Probably not. But that's our standard. And we're going to fall short. We're not going to be able to reach that. We're not good enough. But Jesus has the answers to this problem as well. Verse 18, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear, so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put in your eyes, so you can see. See, God loves us in spite of who we are. And God's not disillusioned with you. You might be like, I'm not good enough to have a relationship with God. I'm not good enough to ask him for anything. You were never good enough. It doesn't matter. I'm not good enough either. But God's not disillusioned with you. You know why he's not disillusioned with you? Because he was never illusioned with you in the first place. Right? He never had this illusion of who you are. There's no grandeur there. He sees your weakness. He created you. He knows that you're not fully there. He knows that you need help. So asking him for help is not disillusional to him. Actually makes a lot of sense. He wants to help us. He wants to give us what we need. But we have to realize that we need that help. We have to be able to accept that help. We have to choose the solution. So a few years back, 10 years ago, I guess, I worked for a different church down in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was cool. It was not cool. It was very hot. But one of my jobs was to drive the church van and to pick up homeless people for our services. Obviously, we don't have a ton of homeless people here, but that was part of what we did as a ministry there. We pick up homeless people in our church van, like a 15-passenger van. Hated driving that, worst job ever. Loved the rest of my job, but not that one. So we just go out and go under the overpass where there's hundreds of homeless people. Like, hey, you want a free meal? You want to come to church? So we bring them to church, give them a home-cooked meal, jambalaya, crawfish, shrimp. Like, it was good stuff. And then they'd stay for service, and then we'd go drop them back off under the overpass. Weird, but like, it was a thing. And sometimes they were hungry. But a lot of times we'd be like, I mean, the food sounds good, but I just want your money. Like, can I have $5 instead? Dude, we have like, homemade cheese biscuits, like sausage and shrimp with rice. Like, it's good stuff. They're like, no, I'd rather just have $5. Right? If a beggar can refuse food, we can refuse things that help us as well. These people in Laodicea, they had earthly money, but they had lost all their spiritual treasures. They were so focused on the here and now. They were so focused on their own material wealth, their own material needs, that they had stopped doing anything for eternity. Jesus said they needed clothes to wear to cover their nakedness. Right? Nakedness is kind of equals shame. Right? Like, we go all the way back to Genesis. Right? The first time clothes were mentioned. Right? Adam and Eve, they're chilling in the garden. They were like naked. And they didn't realize it. And then they, from this tree one day, it's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And one of the knowledges that they gained was that they had the knowledge now that they were naked. And they needed to do something about it. So they found clothes to hide their shame. people in Laodicea, this church, they had shame. But they weren't trying to hide their shame. They were proud of their shame. And Jesus is like, you need to cover that up. You need to take care of that. There's also a lot of medical research going on there. So he proposed eye salve. So is eye salve really a thing? I don't think it's as much of a thing anymore. It's been a thing historically, off and on, usually causing more damage than actually helping, but it really kind of depends on what type of blindness somebody has. Blindness comes in many different ways, shapes, and forms. When we think of a blind person, we usually think like complete pitch darkness, like if you close your eyes. That's actually very, very rare, like very rare. I actually have a picture. So blindness can look like a lot of different things. So this is normal vision up here. It's a little blurry because of how blown up it is. We have like diabetes right here. There's glaucoma up here. We have a few different things. Muscular degeneration of your retina. They all look kind of different. Most of them are not going to fall into total blindness. And there's usually going to be like stuff in your picture, or a blurry picture, or loss of kind of peripheral vision. And so some things can be treated, other things can be treated as well. But God's like, you can't see. Let me help you see. He wants us to be able to see spiritually. And sometimes we would rather not see. We don't want to see our own mistakes, our own futility, our own inability to achieve perfection. God doesn't want us to be blind to our own inadequacy. He wants us to see that we can't do it all ourselves. He doesn't want us to be blind to what he's done for us. He wants us to know who he is and what he's done in our life. And not to be blind to his kingdom on earth. Because that's our job, is to bring his kingdom from heaven to earth. If he doesn't help us realize the condition that we're in, does he really even love us? Like if your son or your daughter was out there living poor, blind, naked, living a wretched life, would you not want to help them? If you didn't try to force them with some help, do you even love them? Or are you just going to be like, okay, well, son, looks like you're enjoying yourself. Glad you're enjoying yourself. Here's an extra $5. That is not love at all. Okay? God sees this, and he wants to fix this. But there has to be an allowance for him to fix this. Verse 19, those whom I love I rebuke and discipline. So be earnest and repent. God says, get things right. So be earnest, not the guy that went to camp. Do it now. But urgency. Urgency not because he hates us, but because he loves us. He doesn't want to see us suffering. Just like you wouldn't want to see your child suffering. Verse 20. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. This verse gets used a lot in evangelism. We tell people who don't know about Jesus that Jesus is standing right there. He's knocking on the door of their heart. He wants to have a relationship with them. But let's look at the context, because that is way out of context. Right? This was written to the church in Laodicea. Jesus isn't trying to knock on the door of somebody who doesn't know him at all. He's trying to knock on the door of your heart. Right? The people in the church, the ones that claim to know who Jesus is, the ones who claim to know him, He's knocking on their door. He's saying, let's hang out. But they're so busy doing this, doing that, working their jobs, raising their families, doing whatever they're doing for fun, going to the wrestling tournaments, I guess. They didn't have football back then, I don't know what they had. Whatever they did to entertain themselves. They're so busy doing that. Jesus is there. Let's hang out. Let's pray. Let's talk. It's kind of an issue we have today, too. We get so busy with our jobs. And we need our jobs. We get so busy with our families. Families are super important. We get so busy with our video games. We get so busy making sure that we've binge-watched the latest Netflix show. That we don't take time to hang out with Jesus. Maybe we say that quick prayer, before we go to bed. Like, God bless everyone I know, and let me sleep through the night, amen. That's not hanging out. That's not a relationship at all. Jesus wants to hang out with you. We might not fully realize what he's saying in this. So to us, if we have dinner with somebody, there's probably a reason for that. But in those days, especially in Jewish culture, if you're going to dine with somebody, that was somebody that you were willing to let have influence in your life. That was not something that was extended just because. It wasn't like, you're there, I guess you can come sit with us, right? Like, it was something that was, like, really important. Because they understood that when they're eating together was the time that they were most relaxed, the time that they were most themselves. Walls that they would have would typically come down. So if you didn't want to be influenced by somebody, you would not let that person sit with you. Jesus is saying, I want to not just spend time with you. I want to spend the most quality time with you. That point that you're protected from everybody else in the world, when that shield comes down, that's the point that I want to connect with you. And you can connect with me on that level as well. It's such a deep point of friendship. So if Jesus is here today, are you going to open that door to your heart? Or are you going to let him speak into your life? Because he can see it all anyway, right? He's omnipresent. Or are you going to let him address that issue? Or are you going to keep that door locked and just be like, I like you over there. I like being in the church. I like being a Christian. But no, I don't want you inside my heart. It's a little much. Like, it's cool. It'd be cool like that, down and up, but you know what? Like, no, not closer, you're not. Like, we ain't do the hug thing, like, just, dab at arm's length. Verses 21 and 22. To the one who's victorious, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I was victorious and sat down with my Father on his throne. Whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So if we overcome the pride of life, if we allow God to heal our vision, cover our nakedness, if we open the door and let Jesus in, then we can overcome. Then we can sit with him on the throne forever. That is just a glimpse, the tiniest microscopic glimpse of what heaven will be like. And if you're in here today, you're like, Pastor Zach, I don't have time to pray 5 hours a day. I didn't say you have to pray 5 hours a day. But let's spend some time with Jesus. Play some music up, Brother Daniel. Just right now. Let's go recording. Sorry guys, gotta go. I'll try and get demonetized. Or not monetized, but we'll try and get canceled. Let's take a few moments right now. Jesus is here now.